Hello, welcome to those of you that are joining us. We'll just let some more people arrive and then we'll get started very soon. Okay, the numbers seem to be leveling off, so we'll get going there. So hello and welcome on behalf of the Marine Biological Association to today's Southwest Marine Ecosystems webinar. I'm just going to give you some information on how to ask questions and a little bit of information on the MBA before I hand over to Keith. But thank you to everybody that's joining us. So as you can see, we are hosting 3 of these webinars. There will be the Fish and Reptiles one on the 26th of March, and then we'll be doing the Marine and Coastal Birds one on the 12th of April. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for those as well. We also, as a Marine Biological Association, have a number of events coming up, lots of courses, and also some free marine biology live talks. So please check our website out for details of those, if any of those are of interest to you or any of your colleagues. I'll pop some details in the chat later on. As you may or may not be aware, we are also a membership organisation. So we have a range of options, whether you're a amateur, whether you're just have an interest in the sea, or whether you're a professional, maybe a student or a early career scientist. We've got options for everybody and lots of great benefits. In terms of the functionality of your webinar today, if you've got questions, we're going to leave those to the end after Keith has finished his presentation. But please, at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, you will find the Q&A function. If you pop your questions in there, then we'll be able to share those with Keith at the end. There will also be the option for you to, at the end, raise your hand, and then we can unmute you or invite you to unmute, and you can talk directly to Keith if that is the way that you would like to do it. So please make the most of those options. There is also a little button for you to press if you want to be able to see subtitles to this. So please do that if that is useful for you. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will pass you over to Dr. Keith Hiscock, MBE. Congratulations, Keith. Take it away.
Thank you very much indeed, Kathy. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And I just want to go through a couple of things about the presentation. This is going to be, as Kathy says, questions at the end. Thank you very much indeed to the MBA for hosting this meeting, and for Kathy for basically helping me through all the technology and material. Now, what I'm going to show today are just highlights. There'll be more in the actual annual report for 2023. But I do hope that at the end, the conclusions help to tell us something about the state of Southwest marine ecosystems and how they might be changing. So obviously, if you're looking at things and you think I've forgotten something, by all means, use my email address and send in your observations. And if you don't agree with anything or think you've got an explanation for how something's happened, then again, do get in contact me. Thanks for those who either knowingly or unknowingly have sent observations in. The unknowing bit, of course, is harvested from social media in particular. And I do hope that I've acknowledged all of the people who provided images, and I got permission from all of them, I do hope. If not, let me know it wasn't intended. So just this picture here, look at that seagrass. I'll come back to that red fuzz on the seagrass, which wouldn't have been there 10 years ago. Come back to that under non-natives. So at the very end, the conclusions. And let's just go there. So that's it. Your chance to comment on highlights and lowlights and records. There's a URL there for how you can sign up. And of course, this webinar will also find its way onto the YouTube channel for Southwest Marine Ecosystems. So that's particularly important because for a lot of people, this is a time of day when they're at work or they're at lunch, and it gives an opportunity as well to watch it again if you want to. And the question I've already asked in a way is where change occurs, what, if anything, does it tell us about the state of Southwest marine ecosystems? That's a key part of what we're doing. So this is the actual presentation. I'm going to mention something about called the community of practice. I'll explain that. Were there any new kids on the block? Notable events, including washouts and wash-ups. I'll explain that. Have there been increased abundances of recent species? Any decreased abundances? Have there been any notable species? And what about non-native species? Any new arrivals in 2023? And what about range extensions? I want to say something for the first time in this series about repeat surveys and how we can basically look back on historic data and compare with what's there today to see whether things have changed or whether they're the same as they always were. And then something I call odds and ends, and then the conclusions. So the community of practice, well, how does it fit in? Well, the community of interest, that yellow area, is basically everyone who contributes, whether they know it or not, observations. Now that might be because they published an interesting scientific paper. It might be because they posted something on social media and I picked it up or someone's picked it up. And of course, it's also conference delegates when we have our conference. And it's just you emailing me because, Keith, you didn't mention so-and-so. But the community of practice is the core group, if you like, of people who make observations very regularly and submit them in a summary form for me to put into the annual report. And that actually became an online meeting of 12 people who do that. They regularly produce information, and they're the people who quite often work out what's going on. So we had that meeting just over a week ago, and that helps me to prepare this presentation. And then the topic team, me editing the annual report, and obviously dealing with the steering group for the whole Southwest Marine Ecosystems Programme. So this is new, this community of practice. If you want to join that community, it's just one meeting a year, but let me know. New kids on the block. I haven't got any records of species new to Britain. In other words, range extensions of Northeast Atlantic species reported in 2023. So there's something for you to tell me if you think you have got it. But there is a species new to science, which is found in the southwest, and that's Myxicula polychroma. And this is an image from Lynn Baldock. It's quite distinctly different from Myxicula infundibulum, which is the usual one that you see. It's a lot cleaner, it hasn't got the eyelashes and so on. So that's one to look out for, because at the moment it will be recorded as nationally rare, but of course, as we get more sightings, it'll become much more common. And now this lot of washouts and wash-ups. So wash-ups are things that basically have got disturbed from the sediment or from the seabed and get washed up on the strand line, almost always because of storms. Wash-ups are things like floating plankton, plankton such as jellyfish and the hydromedusae. So at the top line there, you've just got sort of 3 examples of significant wash-ups. And one of the most significant ones were the crystal jellies. Now, the crystal jellies turned up between, well, the late August and the first week of September, and they turned up off the southern coast of Southwest England in enormous numbers. And it's the sort of thing that I sort of realised a bit late. I didn't go out on a key dive where there were masses of them out at the Eddystone. So those crystal jellies are the size of a dinner plate. They're Achoria vitrina, and most likely Achoria forscalia, although even though we've had DNA analysis done, we're still not certain about that identification. But as far as I can tell, looking back through the literature, using the word unprecedented, do it with care, but I think it works in this case. And those jellyfish were quite often accompanied by colonial sea squirts, by salps. Sulpa fusiformis, and the jellyfish were feeding on those sulps. I'd love to find a Yanthina, this lovely little blue snail which floats on a bubble raft, which almost every year will turn up in the Isles of Scilly. But it's also turned up on the north coast of Cornwall this year. So a nice thing to find, but it's one of those things which pops up virtually every year. As for the planktonic hydrozoans, the colonial jellies, Velella, Physalia, a lot less records in 2023 than in previous years. They've still been there in small numbers, and for some reason, apart from the crystal jellies, we just haven't had the washouts, the wash-ups, the floating species on the strand line. You'll hear more about the jellyfish during the plankton presentation. So a bit of doubling up there. Other events, I just thought I'd mention this because people bring pictures to me. They say, what's going on? The sea fans are all wrecked, you know, they're covered in this mucus stuff. And that mucus, obviously, sediment sticks to it, sediment that's suspended in the water, and they look awful. We've looked at this before, and this is Lynn Baldock, off Dorset. But it does seem to be the mucus produced by a non-native diatom, Coscinodiscus walesii, and we've seen those sorts of events, those sorts of entanglements in previous years, but really earlier in the year, more so springtime. So if you see that, it's worth noting, it's another cursed non-native species causing it, but that's the explanation in this case of other events. Increase in abundance of existing species, interesting one here. These are basically valued species. So you value a species if it is important from the point of view of environmental protection and management, you know, it's listed on conventions, directives and statutes, or if people just find it fascinating, pretty, bizarre or whatever. Now I put honeycomb worms into the pretty and bizarre category, even though it is a reef, so it does get protection as a result of it appearing on the EU Habitats Directive as a reef. In fact, it's doing really well where it exists already. It recolonizes very quickly if it's damaged. It's not in need of particular protection, in my view, but it is a valued species and it's increasing its distributional extent eastwards along the Dorset coast. And you can see the quote there from Steve Trewella. So to me, that's a curiosity rather than anything important. What is important is the downturn in the abundance of the nationally rare sunset cup coral at Lundy. Doesn't seem to be happening off South Devon or in Lyme Bay as far as I know, or in the Isles of Scilly. But certainly since the mid-1980s at Lundy, the population has plummeted to about 30% of what it used to be, and it's disappeared from many sites. But what we're seeing now is the probability of a good recruitment. So this photograph was taken in 2021. I've got a picture from 2023, and I haven't been diving at Lundy in 2023, unfortunately, otherwise I might have had my own pictures. But Mags Ashton from Ilfracombe Dive Club reports high numbers of very small sunset cup corals at the monitoring site on the Knoll Pins in 2023. So Mags has accompanied us before during some of the monitoring sessions where we take photographic quadrats and then analyse them. So Mags has been involved in the monitoring, and that's her observation. So I think you can see the tiny ones there. You know, they reproduce in about July. So probably the observation that Mags made in May last year was probably the 2022 settlement. Now, this is me eating humble pie, because I think in 2021, I made a big thing of the feather duster worm, Sabella spallanzanii, which originally I thought was a first record for Britain. It wasn't the first record for Britain. It's found in the Menai Strait, bizarrely. It's found in Gosport Marina. David George, who used to be in charge of the Polycheek section of the Natural History Museum, saw one about 20 years ago within wadable depths at Appledore. So although it does seem to be more widespread than I thought, it's still worthwhile looking out for and submitting your observations, because it's going to pop up in other places. It's out there in Plymouth Sound where the numbers are holding up. It's a spectacular species. Again, it's valued by people because it's pretty and it's bizarre. And it does count as being nationally rare. It might be nationally scarce, but it is something which new records will be greatly valued. And do take photographs, because you do confuse it very often with the peacock worm, which is the one which hasn't got anything attached to the mud tube, and which retracts very, very immediately when you try to take photographs of it. This one will stay open for you to take photographs. So look out for Seabed and Seashore, and look out for these, because these are increases in abundance and range extensions. And I think this is something where they've been recorded before in southwest England, but the St. Piran's crab is one which has increased greatly in abundance at Wembury. I've been told that it's probably the most common hermit crab there, over the Pagurus bernhardus, which always used to be the most common one. And it's spread a little bit further eastwards, but I'm not quite sure. If anyone can tell me, great. I'm not quite sure how far east it's gone. The feather star shrimp is an interesting one, because it was described as new to science from Bantham. So just a few miles to the east of here in Plymouth. It's been found in Tor Bay by Dan Bolt. And I'll, sort of basically get ahead of myself a bit and say that Dan literally a couple of weeks ago photographed a pair of them in Tor Bay. So it's out there. It extends in its distribution all the way to Shetland. It's not a warm water species, but it's very, very rarely seen. And I think you've got to have sharp eyes to see it. But it occurs on the very common Antedon bifida feather star. So do look out for it. Discodoris rossi, last year we made a big thing of it because there was a new record for Britain and so on, but it has been recorded at a lot of locations now and right the way across to Pembrokeshire. But it's so easy to identify, do look out for it. Oncydella celtica, the Celtic sea slug, does seem to be extending its distribution a bit. I mean, I noted the year before last that it had been recorded for the first time at Lundy in, I think, completely the wrong sort of habitat, but it's now been found at another site on Lundy, probably there all the time. And I think it's worthwhile you looking out for it. Doesn't tend to show itself until it gets a bit warmer in the summer, but it's easy to tell. I mean, each one of those is less than a centimetre long. And then an exotic shrimp for the sharp-eyed that lives in amongst anemones, snake-locks anemones. There are more of them, and they've extended further in Tor Bay. Now, it might be that they also occur at Swanage and so on, but I think it's well worthwhile, those with sharp eyes, looking for it in amongst the snake-locks anemones, other locations. It's a warm water species, been known in British waters for about 10 years now. But, we're all looking out for warm water species, aren't we? But they might just be ordinary range extensions, or they might be to do with seawater warming. Montague's crab, another warm water species. This one with eggs, really, really increasing greatly in abundance. I mean, it's now the most abundant crab when you turn over stones and boulders on the seashore, and Paul Naylor's seeing them subtidally when he's diving as well now. So if you think you're seeing more Montague's crabs when you go out on the seashore, you most likely are. I did a big thing on seagrass last year. I'm not doing a big thing this year, but the seagrass studies continue. And what I'm going to say to you is that there are two species of seagrass. And one of them has changed its name recently. It's not Zostra noltii anymore, it's Nano Zostra noltii. But there's a taxonomic muddle going on, and these are my words. Some people might not admit it, but I think that actually putting a name to the species which occurs at mid-tide level on mudflats is becoming mixed up in this taxonomic muddle, and it needs sorting out. And I'm sure the people who do DNA studies and so on should be able to sort it out. But for the moment, I'm calling the ones which occur on mid-tide level in the intertidal Nanosostra noltii. And there are studies going on in the Tamar, X, Fowl and Kingsbridge estuaries which show that they're increasing greatly in abundance, which is what I mentioned last year. People are also very interested, of course, in Zostra marina because of the work being done to basically rear seedlings of Zostra marina, work out all the necessary lighting regimes and so on, which will help to rear them, and then put them out so that the existing beds can be extended, perhaps even new beds created. And that's all happening all over the place. I see in Scotland there's £2 million been found to basically plant out seagrass in some sea logs in Scotland. So it's obviously popular. So if you look at the left-hand picture here, the work which has been done by Peter Holt looking at seagrass extent in Plymouth Sound using sonar and comparing those sonar measures with the work which was done in 2019 by Francis Bunker and colleagues using drop-down video. Most of the results from the sonar, from the drop-down video, show very, very similar extents. This is one outstanding one, which is just south of Jenny Cliff Bay, in a place called Leakbed Bay. And you can see that the 2019 drop-down video results suggest the red areas, and the solstice seagrass extent is basically the area which is identified by sonar. I've got a copy of the report. Thank you very much, Peter. It should be published about now. I can't give you a link to it, but you can always ask me for when it's ready. So that's a very good study, as was the 2019 drop-down video study. And work on environmentally friendly moorings continues. This is a diagram which basically shows a screw-in mooring, but equally you can use this sort of support system for moorings which already exist on concrete blocks, and they keep the chain off the seabed. There's been a great increase in the number of things. I'm just trying to look at my, I haven't made a note to myself of the number of seedlings which have been found in what was previously bare sediment as a result of the chains scraping the seabed. But quite obviously there is a recovery of the seagrass in the area which previously had been denuded by the mooring chains. And I have a message here, particularly for those people involved in the Plymouth Sound National Marine Park, and that is, there are lots of basically markers in Plymouth Sound, particularly the swimming area markers, where it'd be an absolute doddle, in my simplistic view, to put some of those floats on the chains which support the marker buoys and keep the chains from scraping the seabed. I know that it's not a very big area on the scale of the reef surfaces in Plymouth Sound, but I think it would be a very good thing to do. As I say, it doesn't look difficult to me. I want your opinion on this. Some people have indicated to me that there's been a great decline in the number of Cancer-pagurus, the edible crab, brown crab, and the green shore crab that they're finding when they're rock pooling out on the shore, turning over boulders and stones and so on. And also studies which have been done by people like John Hepburn using baited traps and a video camera for shore crabs, green shore crabs, that there are a lot less of those about. Do you think that's right? Do you think that the furrowed crab might have displaced them? Any idea is welcome, but these are just suggestions at the moment. But something which has declined enormously and which we've only really worked out in the last few months, these things sort of sneak up on you. You sort of go out to take photographs, for instance, of the fabulous plumose anemones that occupy wrecks and reefs and so on around the southwest. And you go back to locations and you think, oh, I've not got any good pictures of plumose anemones there anymore. So in terms of inshore areas in southwest England, sorry, mainland southwest England, over the past 5 years, the plumose anemones abundance seems to have plummeted. Now, I'm not talking about the Isles of Scilly, I'm not talking about deep wrecks, but I am talking about wrecks such as ex-HMS Scylla in Whitsand Bay. And I could actually find a couple of photographs which I could put side by side from 2011 on the left and from 2020 on the right. So as far back as 2020, the plumose anemones, there are just a couple on that prop shaft support, had largely disappeared. And Matt Slater tells me that he went back to a site near the Longships, which used to be, I'll use my term, covered in plumose anemones, but he can only find one. So you keep your eyes open to your favourite sites for photographing plumose anemones and see whether you think there has been a reduction. Some people will shout, well, it's a northern species, isn't it? It's a cold water species, and we've got seawater warming. We haven't got a lot of seawater warming, not at depth. But I think that's one of the options for a reason for losing this rather photogenic species. It's long-lived, and it doesn't normally sort of die off for any obvious reason, but do keep your eyes open, do look out for settlement. Settlement usually occurs in September, but do see whether it was just a temporary phenomena or whether we've got a long-term reduction in the abundance of this much valued species. But reduction has also happened in something I keep an eye open for, and that's the aphecate hydroids. In other words, aphecate, the polyps don't have a theca around them. They're naked. So they have naked polyps. They can't withdraw into a cup. And really, looking back through my photographs from Firestone Bay, 2023 was the 8th successive year that there was no significant outburst of those hydroids in Firestone Bay, Plymouth Sound during spring. Garvia nutans is the orange hydroid at 10 o'clock on that left-hand picture, and tubular indivisa are the other hydroids. And on the right is Corymorpha nutans, which lives in sediment. And again, never had a lot of them, very jealous of the pictures of forests of them in Norway, but never had a lot of them. But again, just haven't been seeing that in the past 8 or so years. So what do you think? Do you think it's just me? Do you think it's just Firestone Bay? Or do you think in your area you're seeing a reduction in the inshore abundance of these aphecate hydroids? Now, last year in May, I took some super pictures of the tubularia on ex-HMS Scylla on some of the railings where the tidal streams are accelerated. So it's not everywhere. They're out at the Eddystone. If you get up into sort of shallow depths, wave-exposed conditions, they're all over the place. So is it just Firestone Bay? Is it just enclosed areas? Let's see if there's a commonality, or let's see if you think I'm just talking rubbish. But here's the real highlight of the year in my mind. Of course, last year I was drawing attention to the fact that it was another good year for common octopus. This year, 2023, so I'm talking 2022. So my report for 2022, this time last year, was another good year for common octopus. Again, 2023 has been a good year for common octopus. They've turned up in large numbers on the fish markets. A lot of divers have been seeing them. And the question last year that I asked was, is anyone seeing eggs? Are they breeding in our waters? And the picture on the right, taken by David Roberts down at Porthcerris, are hatched eggs of a common octopus. And below them is the dead mother. She's done her stuff, she's ventilated the eggs, she's looked after them, they've hatched, and now she can die. So although that was a very, very difficult picture to take, Matt Slater had tried and failed to take a picture in the narrow fissure that the octopus had laid its eggs. David Roberts must have had a GoPro or something, and although it's not, exactly what I'd call a publication quality picture, at least it tells the story. So next year, sorry, not next year, this current year, 2024, let's keep an eye open for common octopus. If they occur again, they only live for 2 years, so they might not occur in 2024 in any numbers, but do look out for the eggs. They're very distinctive, and those are the hatched strings hanging from the roof of that fissure. And I just put in a gratuitous picture that I took of a dead octopus. I didn't take any pictures of live octopus last year. Here's an interesting one. I'm sorry the middle picture is a bit difficult to see, but it's a notable species, and it's a lesson, if you like, for you. Don't go over the top. So slipper lobsters, very much a warm water species, very much something which you might associate with the Mediterranean. So 5 records I know of this year. 2 were taken on the Bizzies, Falmouth. The 2 of them in a crevice, taken by Kirsty Andrews at Blackhead in Cornwall. I know you can scarcely see them, but it's blooming difficult taking pictures in a crevice. And then Olivia Langmead found a cast at Hilsea Point Rock. So 5 records. The maximum number of records in a spreadsheet which Doug Hurdson has maintained is 6 in any 1 year. So Doug Hurdson has a spreadsheet from 1999 to 2020, over which period 36 individuals have been recorded. So bear in mind, it's been recorded in British waters since 1758. So don't get too excited if the television people, the newspapers want to use one of your pictures and want to spin a story about warming seas and so on. No, be cautious. But still, really good records, really interesting. 5 records in 2023. And some other interesting ones, some other novel ones, if you like. Crystal, Pruvotifolia celiotes, which was photographed by Matt Slater feeding on one of these crystal jellies, one of the ones which turned out to be Aquaria forscalia, we think. And I thought, well, does it feed just on crystal jellies? It turns out it'll feed on anything, not anything, but it feeds on a wide variety of hydrozoa. And this is what it's doing here. So it doesn't just feed on this particular species of crystal jelly, but the records are rather spread out and sporadic. So thanks for Charlotte Cummings for the identification. The rainbow sea slug, that was on the front cover of last year's report. It's a picture by Vicky Barlow to say that there are a lot more records of them in 2023 than there had been in 2022 when it was new to Britain. And then continuing the crawfish story, crawfish seem to be doing okay. The catches are rising. Majority of catches are males. But look at this tiny, tiny one, which turned up attached to a lobster pot. You can see the glove, the blue glove, the classic fisherman's blue glove. So you get an idea of the scale of it. That's just hatched out of its sort of 5 months that larva has been in the plankton. And, with luck, that will make another nice, big, juicy, spiny lobster. But what it turned out, looking at the records that people have been collecting, because the inshore fisheries and conservation authorities have been quite on the job, as it were, with regard to getting fishermen to record what they're catching and so on. And the majority of catches are males. So I think it's about 3/4 of the catch of South Devon are males, and perhaps a larger proportion of West Cornwall. And that comes from a crawfish workshop held on the 28th of September in 2023. So that was when people got together, the fishermen, the IFCA folks, naturalists, divers, and so on, and put their heads together. I'm not sure whether that's available publicly online. I'll see if I can find out ready for the report itself. And another sort of curiosity, last year I mentioned about seeing large numbers of juvenile cuttlefish in the late summer. Well, this is at the end of July. It's one of Kirsty Andrews' super pictures, and it shows what she calls a squadron of young cuttlefish. And I just wonder what you think about whether the numbers of cuttlefish are rising, and the numbers which are seen of juveniles in late summer are rising, whether in fact these quite short-lived animals are showing an increase. So a few sort of curiosity pictures, really. And then we come on to the non-native species. There are no recorded new non-native species for Britain in 2023. This is because I've asked John Bishop, who with colleagues has been looking at non-native species for many, many years now, and reports to the sort of non-native species secretariat, or whatever they're called. So no additional non-native species, but the ones that we've already got here do seem to be spreading, do seem to be sort of causing a nuisance. So the picture, first picture there, top left, taken by Matt Slater on the Merle bed at St Mawes. If you look carefully, you can just see the red fuzz on the Merle. That's that species Antithamnionella ternifolia, which I showed you on the seagrass at Corsand in the first slide. It does seem to be getting everywhere. And if you look at the NBN Atlas, it is everywhere. And you do need a microscope, or you do need a very good quality hand lens to be able to identify it. The identification of the close-up there was done by Christine Maggs, so I don't claim any particular ability to do the identification. You do need an expert perhaps to identify it, but the ones which are on the Merle bed were also identified by people who know what they're doing. So it's occurring everywhere. I'd quite like to get back into the seagrass bed at Corsand in the next 2 or 3 weeks to see whether it's there at this time of year, because the question is, does it actually cause any harm? The answer might be no, it probably doesn't. If it's just seasonal and it dies back, it might not. Whereas Wakami, Undaria pinnatifida, could well drag that Merle away. So the whole, the holdfast attaches to the Merle, it attaches to anything that it grows on, and of course the fronds are going to cause drag. So will it actually displace the Merle that it's attached to? I think this is probably the first time that Matt Slater has seen Undaria attached to Merle. But whereas sometimes non-native species are benign, they just fit in, this might not be benign. So keep your eyes open for whatever Wakami is attached to. It's quite short-lived. There'll be spawnings out there right now. A bit later in the spring, there'll be lots of them, and then they'll be dead by midsummer. The carpet sea squirt, again, is another one which causes great concern because it can smother whatever it settles on. And it does seem to be increasing in abundance. Perhaps it comes and goes in certain locations, but Lynn Baldock noticed that whereas it was just present in marinas in Poole Harbour, it's now present on the seabed in Poole Harbour. So that's a species of non-native species to be worried about. But quite honestly, what can you do? Red ripple bryozoan. This is one which turned up at Lundy about 2021, found there for the first time. And it's the very dark red, almost black splodges, top left in that image, which also shows a transect line. Now that transect line goes between two stainless steel screws, which were put in that cave in 1986 to monitor the abundance of sea anemones which live in that cave. Well, we've now got a situation where it's much more likely that they'll be monitoring the spread of the red ripple bryozoan, which looks like this in close-up. It does seem to disappear a bit during the winter. Does it just die back and regrow or whatever? But it is very dark, in the spring at this time of year, and then it becomes, quite pretty actually in terms of being dark red later in the summer. So do look out for this red ripple bryozoan. It's very distinctive. And do please send in your records if you find it and where you find it. And if, of course, you've got the ability to see whether it's spreading. It does tend to occur just in overhangs and caves and under boulders and very shaded places. It might become the dominant species under boulders in some areas. And again, have a look, see if you think it's actually preventing other species from living under the boulders or whether everything's just tolerating the bryozoan. So that's a bit of a story with regard to non-native species. And then this close-up here, because this is a real problem species. This is Pacific oysters, almost certainly in our harbours, weirs and estuaries because of oyster farms. And this looks quite bad, doesn't it, in the Yam? But on the 20th of April, 2023, and we had 3 of us separately estimated how many of them were dead and gaping. And in this particular area, about 70% of the Pacific oysters were dead and gaping. Now, I repeat these viewpoint photographs from time to time, and the area on the level shore at the Yam, where they're present, has decreased. So they're much less abundant on the level shore. But unfortunately, there was a very large settlement in 2023. You might not be able to see that very easily, but there are about 6 or 8 juvenile oysters on an oyster shell there. And that's a picture taken by Nigel Mortimer on the 2nd of July. I've got a lot more pictures from, this year. And they're growing up. Of course, they're growing up. They're getting bigger. And they're occurring on other shores as well. And I particularly want people to go back and look at the shore at Kingsand towards Sandway Point, because I think there are, when I went there 4 weeks ago, there were thumbnail-sized juvenile non-native oysters all over the place on the mid-shore level. So I might not get back there, I might go to other shores, but if you get a chance, go and look. And then a new section in a way, repeat surveys. We're coming towards the end of the presentation. This is one which I've looked at before, but about 3 years ago, I actually put myself into the wrong flipping gully. But this year, thanks to Peter Rowlands for the transport, we actually went out, Paul Naylor and I, and Peter couldn't understand how we'd stayed in exactly the same place for 1.5 hours. But we basically photographed and documented what was on that vertical wall, which Jack Kitching and his colleagues first sampled using diving gear in British waters for the first time for marine biological studies in 1931-32. So this is one of Jack Kitching's images of McCann entering the water. And it's very easy gully to find. And the conclusion was that the character of the dominant species on the vertical and overhanging surfaces and on the rock slopes was much the same as in 1931-32. Now, there'll be a longer explanation in the 2023 report. The interesting thing is that after the 2013-14 storms, these gullies became filled with sand. So just in a boat over the surface, we could see a level sand area and the sand absolutely filling these gullies. So what happened? Did everything die? And then the sand went away as it did, within a couple of years after the storms, and then the same sort of species resettled? Or did they stay alive underneath the sand? We'll never know, because we weren't able to follow up after the storm. It was an opportunity which we missed, but I no longer have command of boats, and so I didn't follow that up, and there's too much to do anyway. So that's the sort of comparison with historic data, which other people might do. There is historic data out there, and I do think that it's well worthwhile. Usually you find out that with a very few exceptions, things are much as they were 60, 80 years ago. And then a novelty, a bit of a novelty here. And this is what perhaps might happen more and more in Plymouth Sound National Marine Park, is that where there are infrastructure developments going on anyway, why not make something by the way of net biodiversity gain out of it? It's a big thing in terrestrial conservation, is that if you're going to build a new housing estate, please can you put in some wildflower areas, plant trees and things like that, which are called net biodiversity gain. Well, this is more of an educational facility right next to Mayflower Steps in Plymouth Sound, where school kids can go down the steps, not Mayflower Steps, but next to them. And then there's this nice platform that they can actually look and see what's living in the artificial rock pools, what's growing on the mouldings and so on. You can see they're all bolted to the surface, so they can be taken off and replaced. But there will be opportunities in Plymouth Sound, which perhaps we'll report on next year, to actually do some more biodiversity net gain in terms of infrastructure, which is going to be put in anyway, adding features such as this. So, conclusions. I put a headline summary there because this is what you want if you're going to do a mention to newspapers or anything. But basically, thriving with expected variability, some increase of valued species, some signs of range extensions of warm water species, but only a very few significant declines. So nothing unusual for events, usual washouts, usual strandings. Some valued species have possibly increased in abundance. Seagrass species seem to be doing okay. Slight increase in extent and abundance of warm water species. And then the plumose anemones, a really interesting one to the likes of me, might not be to the press, but what's happening with plumose anemones, what's happening to aphecate hydroids in Plymouth Sound? Are there some crab species which are declining? And the abundance and extent of several non-native species are increased. And I think that the idea of biodiversity net gain and what I call educational net gain may be taking off. And of course, that's particularly in the case of the Plymouth Sound National Marine Park, especially now that they've got a lot of money perhaps to spend on that sort of thing. Let's wait and see. But do send your observations and thoughts to me. I'm easy to find. Do carry on posting your images on social media, and do send me anything in good time for 2023 to me to put into the annual report for 2023. I'll finish that off by mid-May, so you've got plenty of time to get in touch. So with that, I'll hand back to Kathy to see if she's got any chat and anybody wants to say anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Keith. Yes, we've got some stuff going on in the Q&A and also someone with a hand up. So I'll just start. Francis Binney commented that bryozoans, the Asian bryozoan Watersopia substrata, I may not be saying that right, is out competing dual anemones in caves, overhangs, in the Channel Islands, and it's prolific in shady, damp environments on our lower intertidal.
That's very alarming and very important to know that it will actually outcompete jewel anemones, because jewel anemones are one of the main species of sea anemones in that cave at Lundy, which has got the monitoring transect and which I go and monitor. That's the sort of thing we want to know about non-native species. But I don't think we can do anything about it. So that's the red ripple bryozoan, Water Cypora subatra. So thanks very much indeed for that. Kathy?
Excellent, yes. Francis has got another comment. Yes, Xanthos adult stage looks to be outcompeting juvenile intertidal Cancerous pagurus in the Channel Islands intertidal zone. We believe Cancerous pagurus may be leaving our area due to increasing sea temperatures. The species is now common along the Scandinavian coast. Possible northwards climate-driven movement? Question?
Yeah, okay, sorry, who was that who made that comment?
That's Francis Binney again.
Yeah, okay, fine.
And I will keep a note of these for you and pass them on.
Thank you, yes, okay. No, that's very helpfully unhelpful, if you like to think about that. If there is such a thing as helpfully unhelpful. Kathy?
Yeah, okay. Would you like to, we've got some people with their hands raised. Would you like to
Yeah, I think we're in our time limit.
Brilliant. So Mark, I've just asked you to unmute and you can speak directly to Keith.
No, you're still muted, Mark.
We'll just give you a moment to, yeah. As we all do that little panic where we go and find the button. Otherwise, we can go to Bryce Stewart, and if Mark wants to join us in a moment.
Yeah, hi Keith, thanks for that fascinating talk. Just about Cancer pagurus, this is very anecdotal because I haven't looked at the data, but I believe the commercial fishery offshore has done fairly poorly in the last year or two, but there's been actually good catches of European lobster. And I just know for some work up in Scotland that I've been involved in that you actually get, you do tend to see a sort of alternate states of more lobsters and less cancer and vice versa. So there may be something going on, certainly something worth looking into. But yeah, I don't have the data yet to go any deeper into that.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. I'm very aware of the obviously brown crab are very important in Salcombe especially, and I'm very aware that the population has dropped and that they're not fishing them, which is why they tried to go over to doing net fishing in Salcombe Harbour for fin fish, and failed. But I think that I can easily catch up with you, Bryce, and get a bit of a better feel for what the bigger story is.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Unless Mark is coming into us, Keith, we'll go back to Val Fogarty, who I'm going to invite to unmute. I know you've written your question as well, but if you want to ask it live, you can do.
Right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Val, yeah.
I volunteer at Kimmeridge, at the Wild Seas Centre at Kimmeridge, and you may know or may not, but for the last 3 years we've been doing time searches of the numbers of furrowed crabs that we find there in comparison to the number of edible crabs. And we started doing that because furrowed crabs started to be shown in Dorset. They hadn't been found in Dorset till 2019. So for the first year, we didn't find any furrowed crabs. Then in 2021, 3% were furrowed crabs. And last year it was 5%. So this is just early days. And, we're going to carry on doing this. We do it once a month. And we'll be carrying on doing this for the next few years to see if the numbers of furrowed crabs increase and the number of edibles go down. Just thought your people listening might be interested in that.
Val, thank you very much. In fact, I've included that information in the draft of the full report, as it were. And I think that all that stuff is very interesting. I don't know whether you'll be on the shore when we have that Kimmeridge visit later this month, but I do plan to come along to Kimmeridge on, I think, 22nd of March, something like that.
All right.
So I might see you there.
Okay.
Another thing with Kimmeridge, of course, in non-natives, is that the non-native hookweed, Bonnie Masonia hemifera, has smothered the rather fantastic, I'm told, snake lox anemone bed,
Yes.
which you have at Kimmeridge. That'll be a seasonal thing, I would imagine, and the snake lox anemones will probably be quite okay underneath it. But again, that's something which Julie sent me one photograph, which I've managed to tweak a little bit, but it's not really what I call publication quality. And I'll be putting that in the main report.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so because we were going to do a survey on the snake lox anemones and we couldn't do it because there was so much of it growing on top.
Well, see if you can get some more photographs of the Bonnie Masonia. Yeah.
Okay, will do.
Anyone else, Kathy?
Yeah, so Quinton, so can you repeat the new species found again, please? I didn't note down the full Latin name.
Oh, the new species, the Mixicula polychroma. Mixicula polychroma. Now,
Excellent. Oh, go on.
I think if you look at the webinar when it comes out, you'll see that there's the full reference to the scientific paper by Teresa Derbyshire.
That's not on your slides now. You don't want to flick back through.
No, I don't want to. Well, I could do, but you know, you've got to write it down, and you're easier off doing that from thing. But I've just gone out. So I think it was a second slide, wasn't it, or something like that? Yeah. So there you can see it. It's always difficult to copy the DOI with a pen, but I think if you just did a search for Derbyshire Mixicula, Mixicula infundibulum, because the paper was, so it was almost, the new species was an aside in the paper. But anyway, there you are. Anyone else?
Anyone else? At the moment, no, we haven't got anyone else. If anyone else would, we've got one more. We have got one more. It does take a little while to type, doesn't it? Alderney Wildlife Trust says we also completed intertidal crab surveys on Alderney. We have found in the last 2 years an increase in xantho species and a decrease in cancerous pagaris species, similar to the points raised. We have also found the cancerous pagaris individuals have poor shell condition, example attached spirobis, black spot disease, and missing limbs. Has this been spotted elsewhere? We are concerned of their fitness as well as their population.
Right, that was I mean, if we've had lots of valuable comments from the Channel Isles, if you can actually email me with your observations, you know, so that in a form which I can copy and repeat, then that would be extremely useful. And that's why I put this first slide up, because it's got my address on it. It's very interesting, very easy, khis@mba.ac.uk. And that counts for anyone else who's attended this meeting, or anyone else in the recording of it, who sees the recording of it, then do get in touch with me with your interpretations, your additional observations, and so on. But no, thank you very much indeed, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Kathy, for keeping me in order and sorting me out with this equipment and such like.
You're very welcome. And yes, thank you to everyone for your comments and your questions. And we will, I will pass on the observations that have been popped into the Q&A to you, Keith. And we'll finish it there, I think. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Bye.